I know just enough about NHL goaltending to make me dangerous, so today I asked an expert what the heck is up with the goaltending in Columbus this season. That's what we're talking about on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen today every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. So I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. I thought about recapping last night's game, and then I thought about how many times I've recapped a game where the Blue Jackets have a 2-goal lead, and then get rid of it, and then allow a goal with the extra net, with the extra man, empty net, and then lose in overtime. And I'm tired of that, so I thought let's talk about goaltending instead, because there's a lot to be said about the goaltenders in the Blue Jackets organization, and I brought an expert to talk to me about all of them. So I've got Greg Balloch, who is the goalie scout for Elite Prospect, and he also works for InGoal magazine. So he knows what he's talking about with goalies. And we talk a little bit today about Elvis Merzlikins, the season he's having. We're looking at Daniil Tarasov and what his future might be. We're looking at Jet Greaves. And we also take a quick look in at Sergei Ivanov and what kind of goalie he could turn into for the Blue Jackets. So I'm just going to get right into my conversation with Greg, because he's much smarter than I am and says things much better than I do. You all know I love goalies. We love goalies here on Locked On Blue Jackets. And so I thought, let's find someone that knows more about goalies than me. And so I've got certified goalie expert Greg Balloch here. And we're going to talk about Merzlikins. We're going to talk about Tarasov. We're going to talk all the way down the goaltending pipeline. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some potential future Blue Jackets goalies, because they haven't drafted one in a couple of seasons, and I know some of my everydayers are getting kind of antsy about how the Blue Jackets need to draft a goalie. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But Greg, let's start off talking about the big guy, kind of the unpopular guy in town at the minute, Elvis Merzlikins. I have been a big Elvis defender basically his entire career. Mm-hmm. What have you seen from Elvis this season that, like, have you seen anything that feels different about his game from previous seasons? Because it feels almost like he's a different goalie than he was last season. And I'm not sure if that's recency bias on my part or if there's actually something that's changed about his game.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a intentional change, but he's kind of gotten back to his old ways from even before he came to North America. He was always known as, a guy who would, if the situation kind of sped up around him, he just kind of push the gas pedal a little bit harder. And that's not what you want to do as a goalie, right? You feel like you're behind a play, you start chasing it, and you go even faster, and you end up even more behind. So he kind of reverted to his old ways, I would say, from, as a youngster, the way he played, because when he first came over, he was much more refined. They talk about his feet, and he quieted down considerably and had far less motion in his game than we saw for when he was really young. You watch the clips of when he was coming up in the Swiss leagues, like, it was exciting because he had so much energy and he was all over the place, but not with the style you want to play if you want to be a consistent, everyday, solid starting goaltender, right? You don't want to just show flashes of that. And he was able to kind of hone that, I feel like, at the start of his career. And then this year, maybe he's gotten away from that a little bit because the situation around him isn't what he wants it to be. And he's trying so hard that you end up, it's like a spiral effect, right? You're pushing so hard for something that you should really be doing the opposite, is calming down and relaxing and maybe playing a little bit more conservatively. And I think he's doing the opposite of that, which has led to some of the issues.
Yeah. Is that an issue with kind of him as a goalie, or is it that he's trying to, like you mentioned, chasing the game? Obviously, the Blue Jackets have kind of struggled defensively this season, and also for the past several seasons in a row.
But his advanced numbers aren't great either.
Is it, a mix of, well, he's playing in front, he's not playing behind stellar defense, but we're seeing other goalies like Tarasov, who's playing behind the same defense and is thriving. So what's the difference between how Elvis is kind of approaching the games and how Tarasov is approaching the games, do you think?
Well, the advanced numbers don't lie, right? I think that's what it comes down to. Is Elvis has always been a good high danger save percentage goaltender for most of his career, and that's something you look for when you're trying to find maybe a diamond in the rough or a guy who's, total raw numbers might exactly show it, but he's got something there. You look at the high danger numbers, and Elvis has always been good at that. And you've seen that start to slip, right? His high danger, his all danger percentage is down this year. So it's something, right? There's something there to it. And I think for me, it's just maybe that mental approach that he has. And he is a guy who kind of rides the highs and rides the lows. And you love it when he's riding the high because it's, he's unbeatable, right? But he's the type of goalie that can do that. And that's why it's so tantalizing. But when he's low, like I said, it's a bit of a spiral effect. And I think that's just the nature of his game. I think it's just how he approaches life. It's how he approaches goaltending. It's baked into who Elvis Merzlikins is. So, in a reality, he should be taking a step back and being a little more conservative, but I don't think he's able to do that with the situation that he's been dealt with.
Yeah, I've always called him he's a high risk, high reward goalie. You either get Vezina Elvis or you get unplayable Elvis. Yeah. And it felt like at the start of the season we were getting a little bit more Vezina Elvis, and now it feels a little bit like, like you said, he's kind of reverting back to his own ways. I think there's probably some, not strife in the locker room, but I think he's probably struggled, personally speaking, with everything that's gone on the past couple of years. But something I'm interested in is, obviously the Blue Jackets got a new goaltending coach this season. Has that changed things? Has that, have you seen anything from kind of the Blue Jackets goalies this season that you can point to and think, okay, that's a coaching thing?
It's hard to really judge on a 1 year basis because a lot of these guys are projects at this point, and Elvis not one of them, but there's the younger guys coming up for sure. It's really hard to give any kind of analysis on a guy who's only been there for a year, right? He hasn't really had a chance to work in what he's want to work in with a lot of these goalies, and I think a lot of people don't have the right understanding of what a goalie coach does a lot of the time, because with the goalie departments that teams have now, a lot of the mentality and approach and the brains of the operation are decided on by somebody else, and then it's the goalie coach's job to put that into action. And he's almost there as I call them like a personal trainer, almost like they're there daily to keep those guys in shape and to maybe notice a few trends in their game, work on that to fix it quickly. But you're not making full scale changes to anyone's game during the year. A lot of the time, that's not the time to be making those kinds of changes. It's the job of a goalie coach is to keep the guys fresh and like I said, to maybe notice some trends in their game and fix it quickly. But you can't really pin on what's happened this year to the Blue Jackets on to one person. I think it's been a whole a lot of different reasons why it's happened. So
a lot has happened from a lot.
I'm not ruling out that it could be the goalie coach, but it's from what I've heard, and my experience just from following goalies and goalie coaches over the years, it's really tough to pin an entire struggle on just 1 year of a goalie coach. But maybe the change is part of the problem, that it wasn't an easy time getting used to that relationship, if that's what it was. But like I said, I haven't heard anything specifically about there being any issues, and a lot of these, if you're worrying about any changes in their game, like I said, a lot of these changes that they make come in the off season. It's stuff that you work on with your own personal goalie coach that you've picked to work with in the off season. You're not working with your team's goalie coach. So if it is one of those things, then don't be pinning that on the team's goalie coach. It might be something that was worked on in the off season, if that's what it was.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of talk about Elvis's contract. Obviously, it's $5.4 million, I think, for another 3 seasons.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. Is Elvis's position in Columbus I don't want to say salvageable because I don't think it's, it's not like actively burning down right now. It's not ideal, but I think we're kind of seeing flashes from Elvis of what that contract could look like. Is it worth the Blue Jackets continuing to work with Elvis, or do you think that this relationship and this tenure with Columbus has it run its course? Do you see him going somewhere else this summer and maybe succeeding there? New scenery, new experiences, things like that.
It could certainly go that way, but I've seen tougher situations work themselves out. Honestly, I've seen goalies who you thought were down and out come, rising like a phoenix out of the ashes and come right back into the picture. And, so I don't want to rule that out either. That's another thing I've learned just from being around goalies my whole life is just never rule a guy out who's done it before in the past. Like we're seeing it with Jonathan Quick this year. It's a different situation with the Rangers team that he's got in front of him, but with the right structure and the right game plan and playing defensively in a way that complements Elvis Merzlikins, I could see him getting back to similar numbers than what he had before, for sure. And like I said, he's always had those good high danger numbers, which is the tantalizing part of it, saying like, oh, if he is able to get that consistency back, he has that next level in terms of stopping these high danger chances that other goalies can't get to, frankly, because he's got the talent to do that. So, goalies are so frustrating in a way because they tantalize you with that ability and making saves that they shouldn't make, but then they allow the goals that really have no business going in, which is the larger issue. And at the end of the day, you need to eliminate those because that is what gets your team behind. And I always reference Kevin Woodley, my editor at InGoal magazine, has a great stat. If you allow a low danger percentage goal, you essentially need the other goaltender to also give up a low danger percentage goal to even the scales. You've tipped it that far by allowing a low danger percentage goal. So eliminating those from your game, as good as that great high danger save percentage is, you got to get that out of your game. Otherwise you're not going to stick at the NHL level.
In a minute, we've got more of my conversation with Greg about goalies, but first I've got to tell you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. They've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, so you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or you're going to get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're going to burn rubber, not cash. They've got the parts you need at the prices you want, so it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to US customers. Yeah, it always feels like, and again, I always assumed that this was maybe kind of a confirmation bias thing, but it always feels that way, that like you make 10 amazing saves in a row and then the one that you let in is just, it just rolls on in, and I feel like the Blue Jackets have had their fair share of those this season. And that's kind of something that I've noticed a lot with their other goalie, Daniil Tarasov, who has had some ups and downs this season and through his career. Obviously, he made his NHL start at a less than ideal time where I think all of the goalies were injured. They had no choice but to start Tarasov. They ended up signing their fifth string goalie to an NHL contract just so they could have a backup. It was a time. Daniil Tarasov he's been absolutely excellent in the month of March for the Blue Jackets so far. I think his lowest save percentage in the month of March right now is a .928 in 6 games.
Yeah.
So he's been great. He's also been not great this season. And obviously it's highly unlikely that he is one or the other. He's probably somewhere in the middle, but like, where do you see Tarasov falling on the scale of like, is he closer to this kind of 928, 930 goalie that we see, or is he closer to kind of the, he allowed 6 goals on 30 shots goalie that we've also seen from him this season?
Yeah, I've always been fairly high on Tarasov. I don't get a lot of goalie scouts and other goalie coaches coming to me saying, hey, like,
what do you know about this guy? Or like, you really got to keep an eye on this guy. Like, they don't come to me with a certain name like that too often. And Tarasov was one of those guys when he was first coming up as like, get a load of this guy when he was, 16, 17 coming up, because he's going to be the next big thing. And so he was a guy I've watched from a pretty young age come through the system. And, we probably should have gone higher than the third round when he was selected. It was just some apprehension about getting him over to North America. And, it was, I think a goalie that has a really high ceiling. And I think he's a guy that you want to keep in your system as long as you can, because if he figures it out with that consistency and having a month like he's having now shows that he can do it for long stretches of time on a good team. I see him as a guy that could play every day in the NHL for sure. So I think he's another guy in the system that, you can definitely work with and keep around, because I think he, like I said, he's got the pedigree that I think allows me to think that he can be a starter in the league, and more of what you're seeing now is what he is than some of the lower points than you've seen him at, because I think those low points are going to happen for any goalie that rolls through Columbus right now. So honestly, like, I think you take the highs that you've seen from him this year, and I would start to, not get your hopes up on him, but just know that he has the ability, and goalie coaches around the NHL regard him very highly as a goaltender that can potentially be something in the league.
I talked to, this was, I think, when I was doing my draft prep last year, I talked to Will Scouch about kind of scouting goalies and how do you even like analyze goalie prospect, because again, like, it's they don't make any sense a lot of the time. And he said that, for him anyway, he looks and he's like, what level they've played at, are they stopping the puck? Because typically, if they're stopping the puck at that level consistently, they move up to the next level, they stop the puck there, they're going to keep doing that. And Tarasov, I think, is one of those guys that no matter what level he's played at, he has stopped the puck. And I think he's a really interesting prospect that maybe was a little bit rushed by the Blue Jackets, because obviously they went from having a fairly deep goalie pool. I think obviously they had Bobrovsky, Korpisalo,
Forsberg was there,
Merzlikins,
Anton Forsberg.
Forsberg. They had Kivlenix, who obviously passed away, and Veini Vevalainen, who I was really high on, and then obviously he went somewhere else to try and jump the ladder. Didn't work out. He's back in Finland, I believe. And I believe the player that we traded for is also back in Finland. And they went from that to, I guess Daniil Tarasov is now our third string guy, who has become our second string guy, who might become our first string guy. Like, how dangerous is it to rush a goalie prospect's development like they have? Like, obviously, I think that is that part of why he struggled a little bit to start his career.
I am on the firm other side of that argument. I think teams need to be way more bullish on their prospects a lot of the time. I think for me, when you're scouting goalies, you look for red flags is my big thing. And you see, every goalie is going to have, no goalie's perfect. Every goalie's going to have some red flag to their game or some issue. And some issues will be tougher to fix at the next level. And some issues are a little bit easier to fix at the next level. And if you have a ton of red flags that are very difficult for a goalie coach to work out of your game or fix, things like tracking issues, stuff that is more talent based than, even coachable a lot of the time. If you're already starting to show those red flags at a lower level, then, guys like that, I would obviously not rush through the system. You want to keep them down and make sure they're ready. But if your red flags are extremely minimal, you do a lot of the talent based things, like I said, extremely well, give them a shot at the next level. Like, there are so few opportunities for goaltenders, and you talk to any former professional goaltender and they say there's just the AHL is crawling with goalies that are just waiting for an opportunity and they just don't ever get it in their career, and they go to Europe and they make more money there, and then that's their career. And they're, people see them as draft busts because they were, a second round pick that never ended up playing in the NHL. But these are fantastic goaltenders that just honestly never get an opportunity to play at the next level. And it's just the nature of the position. So I think it's people need to change their judgment of goalies in that regard. I think just in how we base them off at the end of their careers. If they've played AHL at a lot of years, then that's a successful career, in my opinion. If they just never got their opportunity, then I don't know.
I've got more of my conversation with Greg about goaltending in just a second. But first, I've got to tell you all about Game Time. And about you guys, I'm really bad at planning ahead when I buy tickets to an event. Sometimes I'm like, man, we don't have anything to do tonight. Let's go to a hockey game. And sometimes some ticket services are going to make you pay a lot of money for last-minute tickets. Game Time is not that. They are fast and easy. They've got sports, music, comedy, and theatre events near you, last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat. And if you find tickets in your section and row for less, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. They take the guesswork out of buying tickets. I love Game Time. It's the only app that I use now. I used to use other inferior ticketing services, but they were expensive. They had a bunch of like secret add-on fees when you get to checkout. Game Time has none of that. They give you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Open the app, find your game, boom, done. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
I don't know what you think.
Yeah, the AHL to NHL pipeline for goalies is so tough because there's maximum 64 spots in the NHL versus however many spots there are for defensemen, forwards, skaters, whatever. You look and kind of we're seeing that I think in guys like Yaroslav Askarov, who is just kind of in the AHL because they don't have room for him in the NHL.
Well, look at Tim Thomas's career. Like he had to go to Finland for a number of years in his late 20s, like his prime years essentially of his career were spent overseas, and then he went back to North America. And then suddenly he's a Hall of Fame caliber goaltender. It just doesn't work like that. These guys always have the skill. It's always in there. It's just a matter of getting in the right situation. And that's why it's so tough to scout goalies, right? Because no goalie exists in a vacuum. Every factor factors into why they play the way that they play and why they have the success they have or why they don't. And if you don't look into it a little bit deeper, then you're going to miss out on a lot of the detail that's required to understand. You can't just look at their save percentage and be like, bam, I know everything about that goalie. It's impossible to do that. Not saying you can do that for skaters, but it's a lot harder for goalies because there's so many other details that are involved. So to get back to your initial point, I don't think rushing Tarasov was much of an issue because, like I mentioned, he has that high-end ability that's been seen by goalie scouts for years and goalie coaches. So obviously you want ideal world, you're thrown into the Vegas Golden Knights and you have that defense in front of you and you're able to get 18 shots in your first game. That would be great, but it's never going to work out that way. And I think a lot of goalies like having that extra responsibility, get thrown into a 38 shot game in your first game. A lot of guys like having that challenge, and that's the mentality and the attitude that you want to see from your goaltender. And I think Tarasov, like I said, he's got it. There's something in there, but whether he'll have that right situation in Columbus at the end of the day, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, it's Columbus is such an interesting situation with goalies right now because they've got this contract with Elvis that's basically unmovable unless something happens. And then you've got Daniil Tarasov, who's kind of up and coming, and it really feels like they're going to have to make a choice between those two goalies, and I don't know what choice they're going to make.
And don't rule Jet Greaves out either. That's another name
Jet Greaves is who I want to talk about next,
because
I am a huge fan of Jet Greaves. On the ice, off the ice. I got to speak to him at the AHL All-Star game. The nicest kid in the whole world, possibly. He is a guy that you talked about, getting thrown into the NHL and making 38 saves. I believe he made 46 saves in his NHL debut against the Leafs. And he's been excellent in limited action again this season when the Blue Jackets have had 0 goalies because sometimes their goalies break and all of them break at once. I hate having this conversation because I know what I think about this. He's one of the smaller guys, obviously. How much of that is going to impact his NHL kind of not readiness, but I feel like he's going to have a shorter leash because of his size, in the same way that shorter forwards have that like shorter leash because of their size. We're seeing it a little bit with Dustin Wolf in Calgary, I
Yep.
think. Like, where are you on Jet Greaves and his NHL path?
I'm okay on smaller goaltenders. I know a lot of guys that work for teams, there's either mandates that you can't even put a guy under 6'2" on your lists, and a lot of guys just aren't willing to stake their careers on taking a gamble on somebody who's under 6'2". But I think there's also been a swing back in recent years where there's, you're no longer looking for the 6'8" monster anymore, because they've realized that's almost a bit too big. You're almost too slow, and when you move, you open up bigger holes. If you get caught reaching for a shot and it's tipped down, the space between your arm and your leg is way larger if you're 6'8" than if you're just a smaller, compact goalie moving across. So they've sort of goalie coaches have kind of come to a realization that there's like a sweet spot where you want to be, and it's kind of in the 6'4" to 6'2" range, in 6'3". That's where you want to be, because you can still move in an economical way and not be too giant, but you're also not taking up enough net because you're under 6 foot tall. So Jet Greaves falls on the smaller side of that scale. But, so guys on that side of the spectrum just need to be so good at every other detail, essentially, is what it comes down to. And this is what makes UC Saros so impressive in my eyes, because, the margin for error is so thin on goaltenders like that, because they need to play a little more aggressively. You take a bit more front door, you give up a bit more back door. That means you need to be more explosive, because you got to get further backdoor to get to those backdoor passes. And, it adds to the difficulty for sure, but it's not everything. Like, at the end of the day, it comes down to your skill level and your talent. And a guy like Saros, who's just such an exceptional skater, makes up for that in spades, right? Even with his size difference compared to most NHL goaltenders. So, Greaves does all the little things well. That's the part that excites me. He tracks the puck exceptionally well. He's a good skater. He doesn't stay in reverse VH too often. So when they lean against the post and try to cover the sharp angle, a lot of bigger goalies, they get lazy and they just kind of hang out in that position. But he doesn't do that, right? And he can't. And in the second you slip is when the goal goes in. So, like I said, that margin for error is so thin for guys like that. So that's what makes it risky, and that's why coaches and teams and scouts don't like to draft a guy under 6'2", because there's just so much that has to go right. But man, you look at his career path and his trajectory, everything's gone right. He's doing everything so well. But he is, at the end of the day, going to have to work for every single scrap that he's going to get. And you might see him end up be a guy like Spencer Martin, who you saw roll through, and he might get a chance for one team and bounce around. I could see his career kind of going in that direction, just because of the size issues and stuff like that. But and just because he's up against some pretty stiff competition with Tarasov there in Columbus, and Merzlikins has the big contract. So you never know how his career is going to go. But he's a guy I liked for a while, and he's shown a lot of really good consistency in the AHL, which is a very good sign. If you, like you said, you get good numbers at one level, there's a good chance you'll have numbers at the next level. If you can't put up consistently good numbers in the AHL, the odds of you being able to do that at the next level, the NHL, are pretty slim, regardless of the situation you've got going on in the AHL. So you need to be able to show that consistency, and he's done that. The AHL farm system for the Blue Jackets has done wonders for their goalies the last while. They just seem to churn through guys with 9-10 plus save percentage every year, and it's great. Honestly, it's what you need to do as an organization to keep having goalies coming through, cheap goalies on cheap contracts coming up through your system. And Greaves is extremely valuable, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, and especially considering they didn't draft him, he was a guy that they signed because they literally didn't have a goalie that was eligible for the Traverse City rookie tournament, because I believe the only goalie eligible was Tarasov, who was in Russia. So they just grabbed him out of, I believe, Barrie. He played in the OHL, and signed him to an AHL contract, threw him at Traverse City, and he was incredible. Mm-hmm. And I think 9 months later he had an NHL contract. So like it's a really fun story. Mm-hmm. That being said, what do you think his ceiling is? Obviously, you mentioned he's got kind of a tough path to the NHL right now. He's got to get past one of Tarasov or Merzlikins.
Yeah.
If he does that, is he a starting goalie in the NHL, do you think? Or is he a backup? Or is he a guy that could kind of go either way?
Like I said, I could, in my best estimation, I would see him as like a Spencer Martin type, like a I don't know, a 3, mostly on a lot of teams, a guy who could step in certainly and be extremely capable if they need him to take a run of games. But yeah, I don't really see his ceiling as a starter. Like I said, doesn't have the size and he's got to do it for a few more years, I think, to prove to other teams that he can carry the load. And he's done it the last couple of years in the AHL. But yeah, like I said, a lot of it comes down to opportunity and whether or not he's going to get it. I don't think a team is going to be willing to take that shot on him quite yet. But in a couple of years, if he has another 2 AHL seasons the way that he's had the last couple of years, you keep having that success in the AHL, then your opportunities will eventually come. You hope. Even a guy like, I think of like Mike McKenna, where he did it consistently in the AHL for a long time. He finally got a chance towards the end of his career, right? So it's extremely fickle business when you ask to project a goalie and see what their ceiling is like, because I would love to give every single goalie a run of starting games in the NHL, but there's no third line for goalies to cook on, and work their way
Maybe
up.
they're going to get thrown in,
it's extremely frustrating, right? Yeah. So it sounds like I'm dissing him by saying he's not going to be a starter in the NHL, but not a lot of guys get to be a starter in the NHL. That's not anything, to be ashamed of. It's I think he's going to be around for a long time. I think he's going to have a long career.
And he's just a kid as well.
Yeah.
I think he's 22 years old.
He's still so young. That's what impresses me the most.
So young.
Yeah.
I want to talk about one more guy in the Blue Jackets pipeline, and then I want to move on and talk about some guys that could be in the pipeline. People keep talking about Sergei Ivanov, 5th round draft pick. Again, short. I think he's 5'11", maybe, which I think is illegal to be a goalie and be under 6 foot. But he's one of the best goalies in the KHL on one of the worst teams as a 19-year-old who is under 6 foot tall. Is this a flash in the pan? Like, what do you see from Ivanov?
It's tough. That's the KHL is one of the harder leagues to read. And I do a lot of my scouting. I don't even look at the numbers a lot of the time because I just want to get, understandings of the goalie's style and the way that they play more than anything else, because it's difficult to really gauge. And also there's, I don't want to say it, but there's a lot of stat, fudging a little bit, I'll say. If you look at the up and down.
Listen, I work for a 3rd-tier English hockey team over here. I understand stat fudging.
So if you look up and down the save percentage list in the KHL, there's a lot of like guys hovering around 930 when like the save percentage is around 900 in the NHL right now. So I'm not saying I have my doubts, but you always have to take those numbers with a huge, massive kitchen-sized grain of salt, because it's just you really have to watch the video on guys, and I wish I've seen more of him to give you a full breakdown. I like what I see so far. He doesn't have a great defense in front of him. He's kind of making the best of it, like you said, but I don't know what to really make of him yet. You got to get him over to North America to truly know what you have in a guy, and see him in a different environment, because even just playing for the team that he's playing on, it'll be tough to judge a guy based off that. So because if once a guy's able to play a little more conservative, and because no one wants to play aggressively that way when you have poor defense in front of you, but if you can play a little bit more conservatively and have a defense that's able to clear a puck in front of you, it makes your game very different, and that's what makes it so difficult to judge a guy like that. So yeah, I wish I had more of a grasp on him, but he's certainly one to keep an eye on, and never a bad thing to have those wild cards in your system that could pan out, could turn into something. And we've seen quite a few goalies come out of Russia the last little while that have made names for themselves, and that's not without reason either. Russia has poured a lot of money into their goaltending development. About 10 years ago, they hired essentially every Swedish goaltending coach they could think of, and they reworked their goaltending from ground up. And now we're seeing the fruits of that now with Vasilevsky and Shesterkin and Sorokin, and that doesn't happen by accident. And to put your money on another goalie coming out of the blue in Russia is not a bad thing right now, because there's a lot of them, and I think it's always exciting, like I said, to have a guy like that in your system.
Yeah, it feels like 10 years ago Finland was the place to go for goaltending, and it's kind of shifted a little bit towards Russia. Like
Czechia is another big one
with Russian goalies as well. So
yeah, Czechia is another one to watch for. The last couple of years, they've done a lot of money and into their hockey program in general.
Czechia has
It's
been really
done a
fun
ton
to
of
watch,
work,
especially at the World Juniors.
and now we're starting to see the goalies coming through. They're copying what other countries are doing, and they've got some very, very nice goalies coming out of Czechia the last few years.
And that's all I've got for today. Tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit more about some goaltending, but we're going to take a look at some goalie prospects who are not in the system yet. We're going to take a look at some 2024 draft eligible guys. The Blue Jackets could take a goalie as early as the second round. Should they? Who could they take? We take a look at some of the top ranked guys on the NHL list for their draft rankings as of right now, and we look at who Greg likes, who he doesn't, and what exactly is goaltending scouting like, because it's a mystery to me, to everyone who is not a goalie scout. It's a mystery. So we talk a little bit about that as well. I've been Jay Foster. Thank you for listening to this episode of Locked On Blue Jackets. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for listening and making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. Once again, tomorrow we're talking about the goalie prospects that are coming up in the 2024 draft. But until then, make sure you stay locked on.